Here.
Right now, you're checking out the Freddie and Jason.
Jalen and Jacoby right here on ESPN.
He is Jalen Anthony
What up,
Rose.
yo?
I am David Jalen Jacoby.
And on the cool check-in.
Together, we are Jalen and Jacoby. What do we do?
We get the people what they want.
What a game last night. The college football championship was absolutely amazing. It was stunning. It was surprising. It was entertaining. It had everything. But the number one takeaway from this contest, the number one thing that you're only going to see spoken about on Jalen and Jacoby is this. The Drake curse is real. Look at this. This was what happened. Remember Kentucky basketball, no titles. Toronto Raptors always get bounced in the playoffs. Conor McGregor got beat up by Khabib. And then he wore, earlier this week, a Alabama sweatshirt. And we said the only thing that could possibly take down the Alabama dynasty is the support of none other than Aubrey, Drake, Graham, Jalen Rose. Did this game prove that the curse of Drake is real?
The internet is something else because I saw this going around too before the game actually happened, and now loses by 28 title game is added to that. He's not playing. If that's the case, how about so many people unlike yourself that root for teams that don't always win the championship? We can't all be die easy. And so like for somebody like me who roots for the Lions and they won one playoff game in over 60 years, I don't feel like I'm cursed by watching them. Now it hurts to watch them struggle, but I'm not going to put this on him. He wasn't wearing the shoulder pads and the helmet.
Well, all I know is this, we're not sending him a Jalen and Jacoby hoodie. I love Drake. I've met him before. He's super sweet. I love his music. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of his personally and professionally, but I'm not sending him a Jalen and Jacoby hoodie. That's all I know. We don't need that. Because next thing you know, there's going to be some bad news coming down. We're going to get some long emails from executives in corner offices. And the Toronto Raptors must be a little concerned. After all this, the Toronto Raptors are like, they had a meeting. They're like, should we take away those seats? Like, should we take away his title as official ambassador? Now, of course, we kid. Big shout to Drake.
Toronto, the number one seed in the East. They was number one last year.
This isn't really about Drake. This is about what happened on the field last night. Now, we know by now it was a blowout win by Clemson. Big shout to the Tigers for their well-deserved national championship. First team to ever go 15-0. Now, as much as Alabama was outplayed, watching that game, it really felt like Alabama was out-coached. Is that what you saw as well?
So this is a loaded question, and I don't think it's fair to Nick Saban. And here's what I mean. There were some plays throughout the game that were reaches for Alabama, like going for it multiple times on fourth down. The disaster of a fake field goal where the kicker is the lead blocker. Like, I don't think I've ever seen that actually take place in a football game before. With that being said, outcoach sometimes starts in recruiting. And when we're watching the game last night and you see a guy making one-hand catches on the sideline named Ross and making big plays after another, guess where he's from? Alabama. So what happened is Dabo Swinney is the one person from the Alabama tree that has been able to go toe-to-toe with Nick Saban over the past handful of seasons. They're 2-2 in national championships. And so when he's able to go into his backyard and recruit a guy that showed up huge on the national stage, that just shows that Clemson has just as much, if not more, talent than Alabama. And it showed by the way they gave him an old-fashioned beatdown.
Well, I feel that you were a little nice to Saban there because watching what happened on the field, it just seemed like the schemes, it seemed like Clemson had more going on. They were just more tricky with their coverages. They just were into his head all night. And after the game, Nick Saban was kind of asked about this, and he was a little sad in the post. Let's listen to it.
I just have a feeling that I didn't do a very good job. for our team, with our team, giving them the best opportunity to be successful.
Well, it makes me sad to talk about him being sad, but this isn't fully on Nick Saban. It's unfair to do that. I think a lot of this has to do with the play of Tua Tagovailoa. He was there on the field, and I think he was rattled from that very first interception. Because he shrugged it off and he threw a great pass deep to make up for it. But that first interception, the first possession, to throw a pick six like that, it's kind of like, you can relate to this, it's kind of like basketball. When you miss your first few shots, or you miss a layup early, it's hard to get your confidence back. Do you think Tua was rattled during the course of this game?
He had to be rattled because we've talked all season, the last couple of years, about how Clemson has the most stout defensive line. Okay, so they've gotten pressure against everybody that they faced, including Tua, who we underestimate the fact that this is really his first full season as a starter. And so there was a lot of magic there coming in at halftime and making the game-winning drive and touchdown pass last year. But then these are the two teams that are playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. So Dabo was like, okay, I got a true freshman that I'm going to get ready for the big moment next year. And Trevor Lawrence was terrific. How about the fact that if he was to come out this year, he would probably go number one. And he's coming back next year. So, this was great for college football. And Clemson showed that level of talent that they have is outstanding. And doing it without Lawrence, who got suspended for the game. It's just fascinating what I saw.
And two other players were suspended for the game, which is something that no one really talked about. But I'm glad you said this is great for college football, because what this was to me is going to go one way or the other. Like the narrative, because I'm in the media, the narrative was either going to be Alabama dynasty, are they the greatest team of all time? Is Nick Saban the greatest coach of all time? And we were going to have all these GOAT conversations. But instead of having GOAT conversations about one team, now we're having conversations, rivalry conversations about two teams. And already you can see during the broadcast, as the game started to get away from the Tide, they're talking about everyone that's returning next year and how long are we going to see these two teams head up against each other. Like, this to me solidifies these two teams in this era as a great rivalry. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it was so many things happening, so much theater that we didn't even discuss. Etienne had 3 touchdowns. Like, he was running all over them. Like, normally, Alabama is that physical, stout, defensive-oriented squad. They changed their philosophy when they took Jalen Hurts out of the quarterback spot. They wanted to air it out more, and rightfully so, because Tua can give you that. And now, all of a sudden, unlike years in the past, you have an Alabama quarterback that's producing along with the best in the country, putting up astronomical numbers throughout the season. And so now they get to the big game, they're unable to get stops, and they're unable to get points. And this is all about Clemson, so we got to make sure we give them the credit.
Well, you mentioned a fake field goal earlier, and it was certainly a curious call, and I just want to take another look at that play, because if you look at the holder, he looks over to the sideline, and he's like, we're going to do this,
like,
right?
For real?
Are we really going to do
sure?
this? Like, look at that. He's like, look at the defense. They're looking at a nickel package, and then he's like, I got to run the ball. I just love that look that he gave the sideline. Like, he saw them back up into that, like, the field goal prevent. He looks over to the sideline, he's like, we're still gonna have me run the ball with him as the lead blocker. Like, I just love this look. See that long look he's giving over there? He's like,
for sure.
He's like, this is, you see what the guys in white are doing over there, right? Like, they're not exactly gonna try to block this. It was just such a great look in such a moment. And you look at the score there, they're well within striking distance at that moment in the game. Like, they're down 2 scores at that moment. They're in Clemson territory. And that was just such a curious play during that game. And there was also something else that I wanted to point out from the game itself. And we haven't talked enough during this short segment about Trevor Lawrence and his play and his ability. And you mentioned it before, what he forecast to be. There was this one drive where it was like he was just making NFL throw after NFL throw. Sure, he was helped a lot by the catches of Ross and Higgins. But let's just take a look at just one isolated drive that he had during this game. Like, he drops back. Again, he's his own 24 at that point. This throw, And that catch, I mean, that's sideline, right where it needed to be. Only Ross can get to it. And then after that throw is this one, which is this is just a play for the ages. Like that was amazing. The one-handed catch to get a foot down there, and then that gets them to the 20. They eventually get down closer to the goal line. And again, Lawrence makes a pinpoint pass that only his receiver can catch up top over a linebacker in front of a secondary person. It was just a really amazing performance from Trevor Lawrence, who's going to be the quarterback of this football team for a couple more years. Do you think Lawrence will be a number one pick in the NFL when he comes out?
Eventually when he comes out, because he has all of the measurables that people that evaluate the talent for a living feel like give him a chance to be successful on the next level. And you just showed a quarterback really unlocking an offense. And you didn't mention Rodgers as one of the other targets that seem to be making big time plays from the receiver spot. So this squad is explosive, and you got to give a stroke of genius again to Dabo Swinney. That's a true freshman going against Nick Saban in the national championship game and actually getting it done. And so this is going to be something to behold next year because, as you mentioned, he will be returning along with a few other guys.
So eventually he is going to come out, and we also mentioned people that evaluate prospects and the things they take into account, size and strengths and accuracy and intangibles. And Jalen, I just have one piece of advice from Mr. Lawrence. As someone who does the same thing but not as professionally, I think that his draft stock would go up if he's got a haircut. You know what I mean? Like, it looks good. I kind of like the throwback 70s look, but like that looks more like a Clay Matthews kind of a look. Like, don't you think he would look good with just like a nice little short haircut? Or do you think he should just keep living wild and rock and roll in Georgia?
It's just like James Harden beard. Once he won MVP and he put up numbers like he putting up, he can't cut that beard off. Same with Trevor. He can't cut his hair off after they just beat down Alabama in the national championship game. That's his flavor.
Well, I'm glad you brought up James Harden, because while Trevor Lawrence was doing that, James Harden did something spectacular in Houston. We'll show it to you after this. Coming to you live from Pier 17 in the Seaport District of Manhattan, and brought to you by Heineken. Welcome back to Jalen and Jacoby. While all of the sports world's attention was on the Bay Area and Trevor Lawrence and Clemson's dominance over the Crimson Tide of Alabama, James Harden was cooking in Houston, and Jamal Murray doesn't mind the attention was somewhere else, because look at this behind the back, and then the fall, and then you got the and one 4-point play. Jalen, when you watch the replay, is this more of a Harden dropped him or Jamal Murray slipped?
It's both, because what makes that move so lethal, being a lefty on the right side of the floor, closer to the top of the circle, you trying to cut that guy's left hand off, especially James Harden, a guy that can get to the bucket, finish at the paint, and lead the league in free throws made. Okay? So now you gonna overextend your stance to try to make sure he doesn't beat you off the first dribble. And so when he takes that dribble, you quick retreat, and before you know it, that's why they call it being on skates. He fell down, took it behind the back, he jumped up quick, gotta give him credit, and he tried to foul him, because it could have been $1 million move and a $5 shot, but he knocked it down. And that's one of the things that impressed me about many players in today's game, the level of accuracy and efficiency that they're able to shoot with range off the dribble.
Jalen, that was excellent analysis. It almost sounded like analysis from someone who actually tried to play defense in the National Basketball Association. That's pretty impressive. I really like what you did there. Like, you know how to play defense, but you only played it when you had to. Now, the Rockets have won 12 of 14 games. They've won 12 of 14, and they're quietly climbing up in the Western Conference. I said on Wax before that I believe that this is the team that will threaten the Warriors in the Western Conference when it comes down to playoff time. But I'm going to say something else now for you, Jalen. I can see a scenario, and this is looking forward a bit, where there's some jockeying in the front four in the Western Conference for teams to stay away from the Rockets in a playoff matchup until the finals. Could you see that happening at the end of the season?
Respectfully, nobody's going to be jockeying not to play against the Houston Rockets. They're not the Golden State Warriors. So with that being said, what James Harden has done is become the player he actually was before Chris Paul arrived, a volume scorer. And when he gets hot, it can be lights out for the opponent. Like the game-winning shot he made at Golden State over Clay, over Draymond. Like that's the level that he's playing at offensively. And so Clint Capella's done a terrific job of running the floor, finishing at the hoop, getting boards, getting blocks. Like they've been a dominant duo. And so this allows you not to rush Chris Paul in any way, shape, or form.
Yep. Good point.
And to your initial point, when he does come back, that's going to be an all NBA level player who's had injury concerns and issues the last few years, hopefully in a healthy status going into the playoffs. I agree with you. They will be a tough out, but I don't think to the level where teams are going to try to just flat out avoid playing against them.
That's fair. Do you remember on Friday there was that Woj tweet about tension between Jimmy Butler and Brett Brown? And, you know, now that we're a few days away from it and, you know, the Sixers now have a company line on this. They've both kind of come out and said that, oh, there's no tension. Nothing like that happened. We just have a professional relationship that's totally normal. And here's the quote from Jimmy Butler about the reports. If you followed me long enough, you know if I was being confrontational because I don't think that I could hide it very well. It would be different if I was going at somebody with cuss words and this and that and making demands, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm just out here trying to hoop. So Jalen, let me translate that for you. He's like, if I'm mad at you, I'll be cussing at you. I'll be pointing my fingers. You will see it on the court because I am that guy who will do that. And since you haven't seen that, I'm actually not upset at him. Are you following this logic? Do you believe this story?
I'm following the logic. I believe the story. You saw Embiid come out earlier in the year and talk about his role and how he's been utilized. And by the way, he's been dominant this season. Points, rebounds. He's been putting in work this year so far. And so when you add Jimmy Butler, he plays well. He makes a couple of game-winning shots. He becomes the flavor of the moment. And then all of a sudden, the balance of power continues to shift while Ben Simmons continues to just churn out, basically flirting with a triple-double on a nightly basis. And so for Jimmy, getting the ball in areas that he likes to operate is going to be paramount moving forward. But this team, we all know, will not be judged by the regular season. It's going to be judged by the postseason. And when you have three legitimate all-stars on the floor, when that time of year happens, that is going to make them a really tough out.
So while on the Sixers, I just want to make a quick point. It's an article written by my pickup basketball brother, Ben Dietrich, on The Ringer. And it was about how Ben Simmons does not need to develop a jump shot. Like all the media is screaming for Ben Simmons to develop a jump shot, but that's not what the Sixers need to be successful. That's not what he's good at. He's perfectly fine without it. Do you agree with that thesis?
I totally disagree. And here's why. Spacing. Anytime the game within the last 4 minutes, everything's going to slow down. He's not going to be in a lot of 4-on-3s, 3-on-2 transition situations. And what ends up happening is if he can't space the floor, his man becomes a secondary or a third help defender against whoever's trying to operate. So that could be Embiid on the post or at the top of the floor. That could be Jimmy Butler. And so that hinders a lot of the things that you're trying to run. And it also puts another guy defensively in the paint to grab rebounds when you miss jump shots. So if he's able, and again, he doesn't have to be a guy that's going to take 7 threes a game, but you need each guy to be a threat offensively. And so if he can make even a mid-range shot, that truly helps the dynamics of their spacing.
I'll tell Ben that's how you feel. Moving on, Anthony Davis, if you remember like a week ago, he had some comments about legacy and how that was more important than money to him, and that obviously the media people like myself ran with that and said that he's definitely going to go to the Lakers and join LeBron or the Celtics and join Kyrie and Danny Ainge. Well, he was asked to clarify that statement, and here's what he had in response. He said, quote, "I never said money wasn't important. Somebody," our former colleague Chris Haynes of Yahoo Sports, "asked me about money or your legacy. In that case, your legacy lasts forever. Your money comes and goes. But for me, I want to build a legacy. In that case, if you have to choose between money or legacy, I think legacy wins every time, in my opinion." Now, Jalen, I'm going to be the media guy and read too much into this. because you know that the Pelicans can offer him and will pay him more money than any other franchise can because they have his bird rights, yada, yada. Do you think that hearing this from him gives you more reason to feel like he is not going to wear a Pelicans uniform next season?
Not necessarily more reason, but I think this has to start being covered different amongst the media based on underestimating how much money players actually make these days. It's astronomical. And of course, that final year with your bird rights can be $40, $50 million haircut. But you could go and do a Kevin Durant as well. Play 1 or 2 years under whatever deal that you want, still get top dollar, and then cash out later because Anthony Davis is still so very young. And so, like, he has all of the leverage. And he's going to be able to get both. He's going to be able to get the money, and he's going to be able to influence his legacy. That's what free agency, as he now is exercising, like the Podfather taught us, his pre-agency. This is when you change agents. This is when you jockey to see what is possibly going to happen based on a team that hasn't met expectations so far this year.
I'm glad you brought up haircuts because in the next segment, there are 2 haircuts that you absolutely have to see to believe. Coming up next, it's soft move or boss move.